Evening, everybody. How are you doing, friends? Good to see you. Happy Friday. And I'm back to do a show covering something quite a bit different than I usually do. This one is from Glenn Beck. And I actually owe a weird person um, a, um, a weird thank you. Somebody that I wouldn't have expected. Jesus is Lord. Otherwise, his email handle is Frank White. I don't think that's his real name at all. Jesus is Lord or rebuke and reprove. He likes to spam my inbox with YouTube recommendations, and this was one of them. Usually they're just like right-wing troll shorts, but this one was in here, and I thought this one was interesting because it's 13 minutes long, but it manages to faceplant multiple times in that 13 minutes. So we're going to go over this basic setup for this. They did this. I think they released this one yesterday. Glenn Beck's YouTube channel, I think, was on his show. He's got a personality that works for Blaze TV. That's Glenn Beck's online outfit that has decided to her name is Sarah Gonzalez, and apparently she's got an expose about voter fraud in the United States, and Michigan apparently is a hotbed of it, and she's gonna show us why. And as somebody who was born here and has lived here on and off most of my life, it is currently my home, I'm just going to take a look at this and see if we can't get to the bottom of what in the world they're talking about. So first we'll say hello to a few people. Cutlery Duck, good to see you, Cutlery. Or Duck, I should say. Glenn Beck R-worded and murdered a young girl in the 90s. On October 29th, the court ruled that the above statement was political speech and not defamation. Ugh. He, what his career back when he was in radio was not great. Like his little comedy bits and voices and stuff like that, they did not age well. So, and from what I understand, I think he started getting popular in like the Southwest. I think he was in a regional thing out of like Arizona or something like that. And I don't know if it was when he was in the Arizona market or somewhere else. He started getting pretty into cocaine, and you could tell. Warren is here. Good to see you. Barry Shans. Spooky is here. Oi, oi. Clout is here. Anamorphic Mind. Glenn is okay with racism and neo-Nazi. Elijah Schaefer tells the sexual assault was too much. Ugh. He did the Bill O'Reilly thing as well after Fox fired him. Yeah, I think he tried to paint that as like, well, he's got to go in a different direction. And so he was pioneering his way into his own little mini media empire, and it didn't really turn into an empire so much as an outpost. I legit didn't know Beck still had an online outlet at all. Oh, yeah. The Blaze Online. Well, there's Blaze TV, and there's Blaze, which is the website. And it's, I mean... if you go there, I probably shouldn't be talking about it with my phone on the desk right next to me, because now Facebook's going to get really weird for the next 2-3 weeks. Not that I'm on it that often, but yeah, the ads it's going to be pushing me, yeah, real strange. Talk about a guy who fell off, Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson. Yeah. Ew, Glenn Beck. Yeah, exactly. Ew, Glenn Beck. And I'd rather he keep Michigan out his mouth. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So I don't know. I have no idea why this happened now, but you know, one of his cronies, Sarah Gonzalez, did this little expose. And here we go. So title of it is, why does Michigan have more registered voters than citizens? It's a great question. The simplest answer to this is it doesn't. But let's see where they go. Hey, Alex Baptista. So usual rules apply. Yell at me if you can't hear this.
Blaze TV host of Sarah Gonzalez Unfiltered. It was really hard. We started with the name, and then we're like, we got to find a Sarah Gonzalez to be able to do this show. We might have thought about doing it a different way, but we found her, and she's perfect. She is the perfect Sarah Gonzalez to host Unfiltered. Sarah, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm good. I consider that job security, Glenn.
That doesn't make sense. It was an old internet meme from the ancient days. Okay. I was not aware of that, but if Gilbert Godfrey was using that to riff on Glenn Beck, I should look that up.
You're not going to find another Sarah Gonzalez, and we've already named the show. So
Yeah, we looked. So anyway, you're doing another Blaze original. We've all been doing this. This is episode 5. The documentary is called Voter Fraud Exposed: How Elections Can Be Stolen. I have to tell you, I saw a rough cut of it, I don't even know, a couple weeks ago. Oh my gosh, Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Just Michigan alone.
Godfrey used it to bag on Bob Saget. The internet modified the joke to make it about Glenn Beck. Genius.
Is, I mean, you sat down with the woman who was the Secretary of State, right?
Yes. Yeah. Ruth
And
Johnson.
I believe she was replaced by a Secretary of State that was
Voted out. We didn't vote her back in. Ruth Johnson is who they're talking about. Long-term kind of Republican stalwart. She was Secretary of State, I think, for quite a while. I should look her up while this is playing. But Ruth Johnson had plenty of unhelpful things to say about Michigan, helpfully sending out absentee voter ballot applications during the pandemic. She was less than useful.
part of the George Soros thing.
Correct. Yes. Jocelyn Benson. Yes.
The Soros thing. Okay, so you automatically know that this is in La La Land if they have to invoke the name George Soros right out the gate. We're a minute in.
And give people a clue.
Exactly.
Clue on just Michigan.
Sure. So yes.
I would hope it would be just Michigan. Ruth Johnson doesn't have any power anywhere else, and neither does the Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, although she's got the credentials to her. Thanks to Soros funding and her affiliation with the Southern Poverty Law Center, I mean, it's only a matter of time before she becomes empress of all she surveys.
In 2018, Jocelyn Benson replaced Ruth Johnson. Ruth Johnson was a Republican who
Clue on just Michigan.
Sure. So yes, in 2018, Jocelyn Benson replaced Ruth Johnson. Ruth
Yes, we were happy about that.
Johnson was a Republican.
Well, I mean, most people don't care about the Secretary of State. I'm a politics nerd. I like the change.
And who, more importantly, was interested in doing the right thing when it came to, protecting the voter rolls and keeping them secure and fresh. And
as opposed to Jocelyn Benson, who came in there and actually hired a necromancer to make sure that the ballots matched the dead. Yeah, I'm sure that's where she's going with this. Barry Shans, this is a show definitely not written for us. It definitely isn't. Yeah.
Dated. And so, or I should say, not outdated. And so
purging of ballots at a state level, I believe, is federally mandated. So just because you get a Secretary of State that's affiliated with a political party you don't like, they can't just unilaterally decide they can, that they're going to not purge the registration logs, voter registration logs for inactive or deceased registered voters.
What Jocelyn Benson did, she is, as you pointed out, Soros funded. She is former SPLC.
This is kind of weird. I think they believe that she is Soros funded because Jocelyn Benson worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center back in 2014. I think she was appointed to the board. I don't know if she did 2 terms down on that board or more. Probably couldn't have, because usually I think a term on their board is 3 years long. So, and then she got elected here in 2018. If she got into 2014, 2017, yeah, that probably would have done it. She had actually interned for them, I think, when she was in law school or just after law school. She, because she went to law school at Harvard. And I think she got a master's degree in philosophy at Oxford. She's highly educated. She's got a pretty impressive CV. But yeah, so she volunteered at the SPLC. She eventually went to work for them as a board member. I don't know how long she was with them. At least 1 term, I think, 3 years, and then got elected here in 2018. And she's been pretty competent as far as I can tell. I liked what she did in terms of changing things for voters. We have same-day registration. We have absentee ballots. We have for anybody, you don't have to, provide some cockamamie excuse or 2 letters from your doctors or whatever. If you want to vote, absentee, you can.
Just to give you an idea of who she is and what she's about. Yeah. And so she is one of these
Southern, in case you don't know, that's Southern Poverty Law Center, which is
Yeah, George Soros has donated to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So I think they're actually trying to get away with, well, she once worked for SPLC. George Soros has donated SPLC in the past, ipso facto, or therefore, she is a George Soros funded Secretary of State for the state of Michigan. Can't make this stuff up. This is why they're on Blaze TV and she's not working at the Washington Post or something. Not that that's a great outlet, but they do have, they have standards. They can't, pass this off as legitimate reporting. A few of my pro-Trump friends after the 2020 election were claiming more votes were counted than registered voters in the country because of right-wing media. They were wrong. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Kent Hovind, CPA, good to see you. Hello, everyone. I'm listening while door dashing again. Well, thank you for doing that. Concentrate. Don't let me distract you. Ipso idiot. So, yeah.
It's the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So
why would these guys have a problem with a wealthy individual donating his money and using his money as he chooses? I think the George Soros mythology and the nightmare language around him is fascinating. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he's a guy with lots and lots of money who spends it on things that he wants, and they disagree with his existence. It's like, okay, well, there's one interesting way to get rid of somebody like George Soros. Make it nearly impossible for people to become billionaires. But they're not going to do that.
She is part of the Secretary of State project that George Soros.
Oh, I know that, Rodin. And I think other people know that too, because he's Jewish. No, seriously, that is why. Yeah.
Is funding. So she comes in to the state of Michigan and she tries to allow Michigan to count ballots that were received after Election Day.
I don't know that she did that. I'm not sure. I think there was a proposal to extend the amount of time that ballot locations would receive absentee ballots in the election, because there's always, every state usually mandates a cutoff. I think they were trying to extend that, and I think it got turned down. She wasn't trying to, like, this is just this is an ignorant point that Sarah here is making.
Was luckily sued and lost that battle, but since then
I don't know if that was a lawsuit.
We've had ballot referendums that you can have same day registration. This is Proposition 3 in Michigan. You can have same day registration.
And it was overwhelmingly voted for, overwhelmingly popular. It was a ballot initiative, popularly voted for. It's something that the state of Michigan has built into its constitution. It's the same thing that we did. I can't remember what the number was, the prop that put protections for birth control and right to abortion procedures in the state constitution was also done through voter ballot proposal.
Registration, and you can register without showing a photo ID in the state of Michigan, and your vote counts.
You still have to have voter registration to vote. We had, I think back in 2019, because I think it was right after Whitmer was in. I think it got overturned, but the Republicans tried to bring back a pretty strict voter ID standard. It didn't go anywhere. I think she vetoed it. This notion that, like, oh well, you can just go in and vote if you want. No, you can't.
Well,
yes.
I mean, you need a photo ID for anything.
Everything.
Okay, you need a photo ID for everything. This is going to be interesting, right? Because he's going to start giving examples of things that you need a photo ID for. Try to, if you can right away, just kind of think in the back of your head when he gives an example. How is this like and not unlike voting? No, you're basically right on time. I meandered a little bit at the beginning, but other than that, they'd applaud his money if he was a right winger and donating for the things that they like. Double standard much. Exactly. Right. Like, I think as far as like left wing people go, I think this is one of the things where they can at least be kind of consistent, because they're not trumpeting, they're not championing somebody like George Soros having the ability to sway elections. They would generally say, no, I think that's bad. I don't think billionaires should be able to hold this kind of sway, whether they're left wing or right wing. And I don't know that George Soros is really all that left wing. but these guys are like, well, it's terrible what he's spending his money on. I'm like, well, in principle, you can't say that that's bad. You just disagree with what he's spending his money on. The fact that he's spending his money on whatever is supposed to be a good thing for you. So, yeah, popular ballot initiatives that expand voting and protect people's rights. That's communism, folks. That's exactly right. Yeah, leave it. What you need to do is keep the hoi polloi shut up, and you keep them stupefied with reality TV, and you let Republican legislatures come in with the help of think tanks and legislative, 5013Cs or whatever they're called, draft their legislation for them that manages the folks. That'll do it. We're not here to represent you as a constituency. We're here to guide you and force you to do what's best for you. We know what's best, and it's Jesus and not vaccines.
Everything.
Except for the most important thing a citizen can do.
The most important thing a citizen can do. Okay, so you need an ID for everything.
Right. And and we point out in the documentary, it's like, if I were not just in the state of Michigan, but I would imagine most other states and cities, if you go to your local library, you can't get a library card without showing your ID. It is.
Oh, that's terrible. You can't. Do you have a right to a library card? Coco says, apparently lefties in EU are also sponsored by Soros. Still waiting for my money. Exactly. And how did that work out in some of those countries for the EU Parliament that went, that kind of increased the percentage of right-wing populists in their midst?
Is insane that you shouldn't have to show your ID in order to participate in the voting process. And by the way, this is something else we point out. It's like almost 80% of Americans, both left and right, agree that you should have to show a photo ID in order to vote. This is not a partisan thing.
Eden Pure.
Yeah, well, the idea that so most people get a voter registration card. When you apply for registration, it goes through a process. If you were approved, they will send you a voter registration card that has a number on it generated just for you that gets matched to your ballots when you vote. And, it's your responsibility to kind of keep up with where you're, you register based on your address, where you live. And you have to update that every time you move, sometimes. The idea here that you can't, oh my God, everybody just believes that this is okay. No, they don't. It's kind of weird to require a state issued ID when the state's already issued somebody a valid voter ID, their voter registration card. And so when they go with it and they show that, and they're like, this is my voter. And they're like, oh, well these guys are going to say like, well, that could just be anybody, without being able to compare it to their photo. Like, okay. Yeah. Well, you maybe if you wanted to, it would be one thing if you wanted to just give everybody an ID rather than turning it into a poll tax, because that's usually where Republicans go with this. Let me get through this real quick. He's going to show an air filter of all things. There we go.
Across the street, and I have to go about, 5 miles to
you can literally use your voter ID card to get a library card. Yes. In a lot of places you can.
This little crate, little kind of general store.
I don't think I've ever shown my photo ID to get a library card either. Maybe with the larger one when I moved into a larger city, but it's a bigger regional library. So I think for them, they didn't take a photo of it. I think they just used it to confirm previous information they had on file for me. Libraries know everything.
I had to get a fishing license. Needed ID. Everybody in there knows who I am. I needed ID to be able to get a fishing license.
It's because it's probably a state requirement, you clot. And last time I checked, voting is a right. Fishing is not a constitutionally protected right. Library cards are not a constitutionally guaranteed right. Voting is. Thus, the sticky arguments.
you guys see Texas Representative?
I think it's fascinating because these people usually kind of like position themselves as being like the watchdogs of the Constitution. And they're talking about this issue with like zero irony here. Like, this is absolute horseshit. Like, they're not even attempting to think through this. Anybody could just walk into the office and be like, yeah, your fishing license isn't based on your right to fish. You don't have a right to fish anywhere. And the reason that that place requires you to get the license is because they're required to issue them for people that fish. Or, well, the state is requiring any fisherman to have that because it's necessary for the state's DNR or whatever. There's environmental reasons for that, etc. But old Chubby Glenn here just doesn't. Well, if I have to get one for my fishing license, you're going to get one to vote. Well, there's a difference. One is a right, and the other one is something that you want to waste time at.
Did Wesley Hunt talk about this?
No.
Yesterday. No. It's brilliant. He shows all of his government issued. He's black. He shows all of his government issued IDs, including a driver's license and a passport.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got.
Okay, you don't have the right to a passport. Passports are used to travel to other countries where you don't necessarily have recognized rights. And your driver's license is based on the notion that you have that recognizes your privilege to drive, operate a motor vehicle on the state and government highways. That's the point of the driver's license. You don't have a right to operate a car on roads. You have a right to vote. These guys, none of them are getting even close to the point. Why are we watching Glenn Beck? His political party is Things That Bother Me. Yeah, it is. A lot of kids' library cards are tied to their parents' account for ID. Yeah, they are. Hey, Bree, good to see you. What spatchcockery is this now? Reviewing Glenn Beck. He's coming after my state, Bree. He's the three of them are talking trash about Michigan and will not stand. Glenn is too swollen to fish, so it's all lies. He's too red, too. The fish can see him from under the water.
Got like 6 different forms of ID showing how insulting it is that the left is saying that blacks don't have ID. It's
no, it's not just. First of all, it does disproportionately affect population of people of color in the country. That's been shown. Those are just statistics. Those are demographics. These guys are like, oh, well, that's just personally insulting because I know this one guy who's got all the documents in the world. Good for him. That's not the point. The point is, if you're enacting some kind of policy like this, and what kind of effect is it having on the population at large? If it disproportionately disenfranchises groups of people, in the case of voter ID, usually the elderly, which you would think that Republicans would not want to go after. Yeah, why are you doing that? Why are you making it harder for people, Americans, and how do you justify making it harder, or in some cases close to impossible, depending on the mobility of an older American, to exercise a right? This is not them getting out and getting a library card. This is not them going out and getting a fishing license. This is not them going out and grabbing their passport or getting their driver's license so they can keep driving. This is about their right to vote. All of this is just crap. So hopefully they're going to start getting into some Michigan-specific stuff here other than talking about Jocelyn Benson's tenuous connections to George Soros.
Ridiculous.
Well, this will give you kind of a clue into how sinister this initiative is that Republicans in the state of Michigan actually, they had a bill that they passed that was going to expand and allow free photo ID for people. So there would be no excuse to say, well, it's too expensive. And, the idea is that minorities can't afford it.
No, it didn't. I don't think that's true at all. The one that she's talking about is the one that the governor vetoed. Actually, let's play this.
I guess, which is inherently racist.
And we've been told they don't know where the DMV is.
Right. Which again seems a little racist to assume.
Sure does.
But so Governor Gretchen Whitmer actually vetoed that bill.
Mm-hmm.
But just to give you an idea of where, what possible reason, as our friend Steve Deace likes to say, what is the innocent, benign explanation for vetoing such legislation?
Because let's say that the Republicans were actually going to do what she was talking about. Like, hey, where our mouth is. What we want you to do is pass this legislation that requires everybody to get their ID. If you want to know how I think this would work, this is what I would do if I were a Republican. I'm going to engage in a little Pine Creekery here. You set up a bill that establishes a voter ID requirement. But yet, as a provision of that, you allow for the initial granting of state licenses, right? State ID minimum or driver's licenses. You defray the cost for everybody that goes out and gets one. You do not give them to people, right? They have to go and get them, and then they apply for a refund. So now they've made their process twice as arduous, right? And it only works the one time. All renewals require the renewal fee, right? That's how you do it. If you're a Republican, that's how you administer government. You offer to provide them some kind of service, but it's actually a lot more inconvenient because you want to make sure that they internalize the idea that the government is always bad because they're incompetent at providing services intentionally. And then you sucker punch them with, oh yeah, by the way, that ID is not free forever. $25 per renewal cycle, please. And then if somebody at that ID lapses, can't vote. Right, your right to vote then, as far as the Republicans are concerned, is directly tied with the validity and active status of a state mandated license. Big problems there, right? That's how I would do it. I don't know if that's exactly what was in that particular bill, but the reason why you would veto that, if Whitmer was going to veto it, I would veto it on financial grounds, right? Why would the state pay money to initiate that kind of stuff when the state already registers people and issues them a voter registration ticket? They send it to you in the mail. You sign it. You present it when you go to the polls. It's got your signature on it. They can match it up with their records there. They can match the number that you've got in your possession with what's there. I think it might even have your name on it. Or your, not obviously has your name on it. I think it may even have your age on it. I can't remember. I'd have to check mine, but yeah. So why would the state go out of its way to pay for this, right? And there's usually, and again, if it's a Republican bill, if Republicans are offering you something, there's usually a kidney punch, coming around the corner on that.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't one.
So they...
Hey, JL, good to see you. No notification? Yeah, YouTube. Figures. I did try to plug this a little bit, but I didn't plug it everywhere.
They can't even now... because of this new legislation, they can't even ask for ID.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So you go.
I don't think that's true. I've been asked for ID because I've had multiple, living in multiple locations or being kind of mobile. When it's come time to vote, they've asked me to show, like, hey, do you have a driver's license so we can confirm this? It's been a while. We want to confirm, we'll make sure we got the right address. I've done that. I don't think it prevents people from, it prevents them from, I love it when these guys do that. Well, they can't even talk about it. No, they can't turn somebody away if they don't have their ID. What will happen is if they have problems with that, what they'll do is they did this before, back when they had it before. If they've got questions about it, they raise concerns, they offer the voter a provisional ballot. The person votes on the provisional ballot and they hand that in. It gets flagged. It gets like double, triple checked after the fact. If the registration address and stuff don't check out, usually there's a follow-up requirement required from the voter to provide whatever is needed to do that. And they usually have like 6 days following the filing of that provisional ballot. When they cast that provisional ballot, they've got to follow up. Otherwise it gets thrown out. So it'll get thrown out if they let the clock run out. It'll get thrown out if they can't provide the necessary proof. It'll get thrown out if it turns out that they're lying. And then they can press charges against them for maybe being registered incorrectly and also attempting to vote under false pretenses. So there's already security in place. These guys are talking about fantasies.
Go in, right, to the voting booth. You want to go into the voting booth. You go in and you say, my name's Glenn Beck, and they'll probably, maybe, I don't even know, do they ask for an address? And they look you up if you're on the rolls. Or in the case of Michigan, you can now just register. You can go in and say, I'm not registered. I want to register right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can do same-day registration. Different. You in Michigan? Yes, I am. Yep, I'm in Michigan.
But none of it is hooked up to the internet, so they can't verify.
It's not hooked up to the internet for security. If these guys found out that there were voting machines or there was any, and not, but they are hooked up to the internet. They're usually the machines, the voting machines aren't usually connected. Like as far as I know, in the state of Michigan, they're not allowed to be connected at all. not the tabulation machines, not the ballot counters. But there usually is at least one person in there with an issued laptop. I think it's usually owned by the county office that has their spreadsheets and stuff on it, and registration software. I believe that is connected to the internet. They do have the ability to reference this stuff. They can look this up. If they can't look it up, if they have to do a deeper dive on it, they'll issue that person, like I said, a provisional ballot. And then they're going to need to provide more information later if they want that ballot to be counted. If they don't follow through and time runs out, that ballot gets pitched. It's as good as trashed.
Anything.
Right.
And so you can go in and register and then just get a ballot and vote.
What could go wrong?
This is
Right.
what could possibly go wrong.
If you are given, I believe the provisional ballot is also given to people who vote when they register same day. Most states do that. I don't know if Michigan does. I've never done same day registration. I've always been registered in advance. But I think in other states, if you have never been registered, you know where your polling place is going. You go there. You tell them where you live. They'll probably ask for ID. A lot of states do. That you show them the ID or whatever, show some kind of proof. Maybe you bring like a bill, a utility bill, something like a library card. Sometimes that's sufficient in some states. Show them that to prove who you are, whatever. They take a look at that. They verify it. They give you a registration form. You fill out the registration form, and then they provide you with a provisional ballot. And then that ballot will not be cast until they can confirm that until they verify your registration. So it's actually a little bit extra work for the county and the local officials to do that, but it's more convenient for the voter because it's preserving their right to vote, which is why it's a service that's provided. Every time I see Glenn Beck, I'm reminded of when he unironically showed up at the end of Nefarious, as if no one would notice the alt-right Christian conservative agenda of that film. I don't know. Was Nefarious some attempt at like a Christian horror film? The title sounds familiar, but I can't remember that one.
You know, and it's always from the left who claims that they care so much about democracy, which is just so laughable at this point. Not that we have a democracy, but if you did care about democracy and
the people comparing a person getting an ID to vote with a person getting a library card, or a person, well, I got to show an ID when I get my fishing license. You care about democracy. You don't even understand the concept of the right to vote. You're completely ignoring that concept in this discussion. You're just comparing it to like, well, I know a guy that's got plenty of ID. So what's the big deal? Go get your ID. Then go do your thing. Right? Like, okay. Well, we want you to get licensed to own a gun. Second Amendment. They're coming right for me. All of a sudden it's, oh, no, the government can't institute anything like that or put anything in its place because that's my right. You can't infringe on my right. Okay, well, these ding-dongs are infringing on everyone's right to vote. Do I think Biden is going to win? Probably. I just have a feeling. But, I mean, this election is going to be crazy, I think. I mean, right now, I think everybody's still kind of like not really caring because it's just a rematch between Biden and Trump, and it's bringing up memories of crap that people would rather not deal with. Yeah, I don't know. They could go either way, I think. But I know that if Biden gets in, we're going to have to deal with Trump not conceding to losing, more of that crap. But if Trump wins, we're going to have to deal with the fact that he may not be eligible to actually swear to protect the Constitution when it's been adjudicated that he doesn't do that, and he actually violated that before. So
you did care, about the state of your country, you would want election integrity and security. That would be at the top of your list. And instead, they are trying to, in the state of Michigan, I'll go back to Michigan again. In the state of Michigan, they now have a constitutional right to vote by mail. I mean, you are talking about such an outdated system. I think France banned it in like 1975. France uses paper. All of these other first world countries, civilized countries, have decided that mail-in voting is terrible, a horrible way of doing things.
Of course it is.
Mail-in ballot is paper.
Jimmy Carter co-authored a bipartisan report that said we cannot have mail-in voting because it makes it more likely to have fraud and all sorts. I mean, this was something that
No, No, this is bullshit. Trump tried spinning this on Sebastian Gorka's podcast back in like 2020 when the Republicans decided and the GOP decided that the brilliant strategy leading into the 2020 election during a pandemic was to stifle people's ability to vote, which was remarkably stupid. Especially when you're counting, Republicans were counting on, you have to count on a turnout from elderly people because older people tend to vote more Republican. So instead, they wanted them out there voting in person and, getting and spreading COVID rather than having access to vote, absentee ballots, easier access to absentee ballots. Oftentimes when you're older, depending on the state, you have easier access to it anyway than a normal, younger person would. But this thing about there was a 2005 study that was written, and Jimmy Carter was cited as a co-writer of it. And it was like some kind of, I can't remember what they were talking about, but it was examining problems with mail-in ballots. The conclusion was not, we shouldn't do that. Mail-in balloting, mail-in voting has been something that the United States has used for 150 years. The idea that she's legitimately digging up a completely debunked talking point that Trump tried on people to talk them out of voting absentee ballot. Look how that turned out for him. He's not doing that anymore, which is fascinating to me. She's on here talking about how bad that is. This is not Trump's rhetoric about absentee ballot voting. He's out there on the campaign trail encouraging people, get your ballots now.
All agreed upon decades ago. And now all of a sudden there are states that are run by these left-wing secretaries of state, and they are going in and changing the system to allow these types of things.
Let me ask the average person. You're driving in your car and you hear about Glenn's Bank. Say that you...
Oh boy. I hate it when these guys do hypotheticals. They're really bad at it. Let's see. Better question. Do you think Biden wins Michigan? Don't know. It's really going to depend on what happens in the next few months. Not a clue. There's a significant population here that is not engaging in voting in them. At least they weren't in the primaries. So we'll see. Will it be enough to tip it? It could, I think. If they're unified enough against him over issues happening in the Middle East, but don't know. It's a long way between now and November, so a lot can happen. But it is a vulnerability. Project 2025. That is my fear if Trump wins. I mean, it's guaranteed. Like if he gets in, Project 2025 is the way that they're going to be pushing things. I mean, it's and it is an absolute. The worst thing about it is the economics of it. I mean, there's all the cultural stuff in there, which is monstrous, but the most of the financial stuff will probably just completely screw things up. So it's going to be one of these things where these guys try to double down on failed policy again. With the same magical thinking. If you just get these principles of free market capitalism in place, everything else will sort itself out. That plus Jesus. Go to church. Magical thinking does not work. Always failed. Yep. Christian horror film, a film adaptation of a book by Steve Deese, who is podcast hosted by Blaze Media, which was founded by Glenn Beck. Yeah. Okay. Steve Deese, was nefarious. Were they trying to rip off Saw? A president who can't own a gun, but can have the codes to nuclear weapons. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the biggest head scratcher. Oh God, was co-directed by the God's Not Dead directors and co-produced by Trigon Studios, which is owned through a family trust controlled by the former Chick-fil-A CEO. Ugh. Jeff C says, I was a deputy reporting officer in the last Canadian federal election. We still use paper ballots and manual counting, but our elections are different. We use mail-in ballots as well. Yeah, we do too. And the ballot machines depending on the states that you go to, they do manual counts. They'll do manual recounts. A lot of them use ballot counting machines. But yeah, it can vary from state to state. Glenn's Bank, a sperm bank from Lawrence. It's more like an embankment. You just run into it. Do I live in? Yes, I live in Michigan.
you knew a Glenn that had any kind of credibility at all. It's
Too bad
Glenn's
I don't.
bank, and we invite you in to put your money in our bank, and we're going to make it easy for you to write checks. We're going to make it easy for you to come in, withdraw your money. We're never going to ask you for ID. Would you?
You do not have a constitutionally guaranteed right to a bank account, Glenn. Not once have they actually hit on the actual equivalent here. Not once. We've done mail-in ballots since the friggin' Civil War. I know. And you know who else knows that? I know Glenn Beck knows that. Grinzy here and this grizzled smoke show here, they also probably think the same thing. Look at this dude. He looks like... Oh, man, who does he look like? He looks like a career cigarette smoker, like the kind of guy, like, this is what you're going to look like when you hit 55 if you keep smoking, kids.
Put your money in that bank?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Right. So,
hey, Answers in Atheism, how's it going? Good to see you. Good to see you, John.
why would we do this with on anything?
Banks are private. So yeah, they can ask to see your ID. They can do whatever they want. I mean, you're putting your money in their trust. They are agreeing to pay you a certain amount of interest in exchange for that. Blah 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 blah. There are some state and federal banks. There are state and federal backed laws. You know, things like FDIC insurance and stuff that overlap into that. But again, you do not have a constitutionally guaranteed right to a bank account.
Yeah, on anything. It's crazy. So give me some white pill news, can you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everyone.
What kind of racist nonsense is that? What's a white pill?
Will see when they go and watch this new Blaze Originals that they can go watch right now. They
Blaze Originals, go watch her original.
will see some hope in the sense that there are organizations that are working around the clock to prevent these types of things from happening. They are largely successful in the courts. One of them is, of course,
No, they're not.
PILF, the Public Interest Legal Foundation. I spoke with them. They are suing the crap
PILF?
out of these states and out of these secretaries of states who are engaging in this business. They are suing.
Engaging in expanding the franchise to vote. PILF. Public Interest Legal Foundation. Okay. What do you want to bet this is about? Let's see. Uh-huh. The board of directors. Oh, Lord. Oh, my God. Yeah, it's run by lobbyists. Mostly pudgy white ones, except for Glenn Blackwell, who's an older black man. Okay.
About the, all of the dead people on the voter rolls in the state of Michigan. The RNC is now suing the state of Michigan for the, it's just that there's 105% of Michigan population that's currently registered to vote. And, I'm not great at math, but I'm good enough to know that there's something a little bit wrong with that.
I have no idea where this is coming from. This is, after all, the title of the video. How's it going, Red Fang? Good to see you. So based on what I can tell, what they're trying to compare this with, there are a little over 10 million people in the population is a little over 10 million for the state of Michigan. There's just a little over 8 million people that are registered to vote, I think, maybe 8.5, somewhere in there, which is actually kind of proportionately high. But what they're trying to say is, well, there's actually more than that, because there's 8.5 million people, or 8 million plus, and there's only 7.9 million people living here. You notice that? Living here. My understanding from some of these kinds of counts is Michigan is famous, along with states like Minnesota and Wisconsin, for having a decent proportion of its population have multiple properties. So you have snowbirds up here, people who won't spend the winter here, and they go down south when it starts getting colder. The idea here is that they're not actually matching this apples to apples. They're comparing apples to oranges and saying, okay, instead of looking at this is what the census recognizes as the total population of Michigan, and this is what voter registration logs show as the total number of registered voters in the state. They're like, no. How many people are actually there right now? Well, it depends on when you check, because the population of Michigan literally swells in the summer along with the thermometers. I mean, it gets hot and more people show up. People come back to visit families or to stay. Some people who are fortunate enough, wealthy enough, have 2 properties. And depending on where they're at, some of them are still registered to vote here, even though they snowbird in a southern state. That was less of a thing a few years ago because the state of Michigan would, Republicans did this. They passed a law that taxed people's retirement income, and so people who had the ability would keep their property here. They'd buy something small down south. They'd switch their citizenship to Florida, Tennessee, some state where they'd find a state where there wasn't a tax on their income, retirement income, and then they would start voting there. Usually, if they didn't vote, if they didn't remove themselves from the voter registration polls, they'd get purged. So I've looked into this. I cannot find where they're getting this 105% from. I can't find it anywhere. I have no idea where they pulled the numbers from, because when I look at the census data for the population and then I look at the voter registration, there are fewer people registered than exist in the state. I don't know where they're getting their living here or belong here or actual Michigan. I don't know what they're doing, but they're fudging the numbers a bit.
So
right, it's hard to have 105% of anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to have 105% of that pie over there.
Right.
Wow,
Right.
that's a skill.
Right. So, I mean, in talking to these experts,
it would be if any of this was actually relevant or true. Seeing as how Gary is petering out and you've got Doug on lock, have you thought about hitting Gothics or familiar with her at all? Who was in Gothics? Oh no. Why pride is hurting society? Okay. Yeah, you got me. I might take a look at this.
they say vote. Don't be discouraged and not vote, because we can.
So yeah, despite the fact that George Soros is funding secretaries of state like Jocelyn Benson here in the state of Michigan to make it super easy for you to vote, that's a terrible thing. So what you need to do is go out and vote for people who are going to make sure that you can't ever vote again. Sarah Gonzalez, folks.
And still blow them out. We can still overwhelm the system, and we should. Sunlight.
I don't know if you can with he needs independence. Trump's going to need independence, and it's going to be hard for that to happen. Let's see. Jeff says, what pissed me off in our 2021 election was there were Canadians that cried election fraud the day after. I spent a lot of time explaining that election fraud is not a thing in Canada. Yeah.
Is the best disinfectant. Knowledge is power. I mean, we are exposing these people for what they are doing, and the more exposure that we can give them, the less likely it is that they are able to just commit this in broad daylight. And like I said, we have these legal foundations who are suing these states, and in most cases, in a lot of cases, they are largely successful in that. So if Secretary
Yeah, I'm probably gonna be sorry for this, for getting into Gothic stuff, and then I think I've watched some people mention her before. I don't know if I've actually watched anybody really do any commentary on her. I've never watched any of her stuff myself, so this should be fun.
Secretary of State Benson isn't going to remove dead people from her voter rolls until the courts force her to. Well,
yeah, see, that part is mandated, so we're already on track to purge something like 300,000 plus people, I think, for this year. If they haven't been done already, there's another 300,000 plus that are set to be purged from the voter rolls in 2025 for the state of Michigan. So she's farting out of her face like a hippo. This is just stupid. I mean, she's just making noises that stink. there is no evidence to this. All the evidence that I can find is to the contrary of what she's talking about. This is the worst kind of hackery that I've seen in a while. What's interesting about her gutter tier level of hackery is that Beck is playing right into it with absolutely, like, Beck has been around for a long time. He's engaged with a lot of this rhetoric. I find it hard to believe that Beck does not know how to engage this argument and be like, well, voting's a right. And what I really don't understand is if you're actually trying to churn this kind of stuff out, why are you churning this out when the guy that you support, like, they don't support Biden? I mean, it's clear. But the guy that you support is actually for Republicans using absentee ballots. So why would you time this for now? I don't know if Sarah Gonzalez is just working through some stuff. Like, let's do this now so that you're not working through this stuff 8 weeks, 6 weeks before the election. Because at that point, they're not going to be talking about this. They're not going to talk about absentee ballots. I guarantee you. In 2 months before this, or 6 weeks before people are ready to vote, it's suicidal. That they've got their marching orders, they've got their talking points. They're not going to be discouraging their own from voting absentee ballot. Somebody's going to be like 2020, the 2020 election. We did this before. I will be happy to be wrong. If my prediction is wrong and they lack that level of savviness and they go right back into repeating it, please, no one correct them.
Well, you know what? At the end of the day, she's still going to be forced to remove these people. So we are making moves. We have organizations.
Okay, I don't know if she's aware of this. Jocelyn Benson actually wrote a book on Secretaries of State, and I wonder if Sarah Gonzalez would be interested in knowing that Jocelyn Benson agreed with the state of Michigan Supreme Court when it ruled in favor of Donald Trump when they ruled correctly. I agree that the Secretary of State, per the state of Michigan's Constitution, does not have the authority to remove a party candidate, from a primary ballot. She agreed with that completely. She's like, the Constitution doesn't allow me that authority. Frankly, I don't want that kind of authority. You'd have to do a lot of major changing in order to grant a Secretary of State that authority. Does she get any credit from Trumpers for siding with the state of Michigan Supreme Court for that? Because I saw the same ding dong that sent me this video, sent me a video talking about how, the state of Michigan gets it right. Yeah, their court said, their court ruled in favor of Donald Trump. We're winning left and right, beta lib cucks. Like, okay. And Jocelyn Benson agreed with that. So
that are tackling this, but we have to expose this for what it really is.
I will tell you, I think that there is a good chance that a landslide does happen. I mean, I just can't imagine going into the booth and you being a Democrat and pulling the lever for more of this and saying, I think Joe Biden is the guy to trust with possible World War III. I think he's got.
You want Biden in there if you think World War III is coming?
Not the economy.
Or you want Trump in instead? Or how about RFK Jr.? I mean, it was between RFK Jr. and Trump. I think I'd go for RFK Jr., brainworms and all, even if he had a fresh one in there.
Right. I think, all of the things that he has done, you might pull it for RFK Jr. or Trump, but I just cannot see people voting for him. And
okay, what about so where's his incredulity when it comes to how many independents does he think are going to be willing to stomach voting for a convicted felon as opposed to just not voting at all, or writing in somebody, or voting for RFK or something like that, whatever alternative is on their ballot? This isn't really an argument. This is just him being like, I just can't imagine why anyone, even Democrats, would be like, I want more Biden. Like, okay, legislatively, his administration has been pretty successful. The number one reason I'll be voting for Biden is because, well, actually, I'll get into that in closing. The state of Michigan literally has voter registration statistics that counter what she is saying, but also show the numbers of inactive voters that will be removed in 2025 and 2027. Exactly. Yeah, the purge can, they got like the purge totals are the end of the projected number of hundreds of thousands of people are going to be removed. So she's just completely talking like Dustin got that. I don't think Dustin lives here in the state of Michigan. Probably got that with a Google search. You can go right to the state of Michigan's websites, unless, of course, the websites are controlled by Jocelyn Benson. And remember, Jocelyn Benson is controlled by that George Soros money, so you can't trust anything. Truth, Jeff, a democracy which only exists to serve the protected majority class isn't a democracy at all. Yeah, which is precisely what these guys would like, right? Because it's got to be the working class and the poor need to be managed so that the wealthy people who have won at capitalism are protected by the law and can continue to gain more money at the expense of the poor and win at capitalism. Trump doesn't have the women's vote, doesn't have the independents, and most Republicans aren't going to vote for. Yeah, maybe. Most of the Republicans aren't going to vote for him because he's a criminal. I think that I don't know about that. I think the last part. I think the majority of Republican voters will vote for him. That's my guess. I could be wrong, and I'd be happy to be wrong. It'll be interesting to see if there's like a depressed turnout. The base is definitely going to be showing up. They will show up. That 30 to 34%, 35% of real MAGA heads. They'll be there. They're going to be there with bells on and AR-15s on their back if they could be. But yeah, the independent voters, that could be sticky, and a lot of it is going to depend on the women's vote turnout, and a lot of this is going to hinge on abortion rights, because those are getting more and more restrictive. I mean, reproductive rights are getting more and more restrictive in every state, especially in states where Republican legislatures are trying to legislate even more of that control away from individuals. So they're running on empty.
And honestly, when people ask themselves, was I better off 4 years ago? Like a lot better off?
By my math, that was 2020. Nobody was better off in 2020.
The answer is yes.
In a pandemic. Glenn Beck had COVID in 2022 for the second time. Can't find out when he had it first. It got into his lungs. He told Mark Levin that. So 2022, I don't think he was better off. He had COVID then. 2020 was not better for most people. Now, in terms of like whether or not you had money in 2020, like I can vouch for that. That was mostly because you couldn't buy anything. I was fortunate enough to have the job that I had, and I was still making a steady paycheck, working from home. I did have a reduction in hours for a little bit, but that was offset because we were allowed to file for underemployment, so that helped. Some of the grant money that came in, that was great. I was able to kind of put that away, and the reason that I didn't spend any of that was because there were shortages of things. When you did have a surplus of money, it was like, hey, I'm going to go out and do some shopping. Like, no, you're not. You're gonna buy groceries. Most of it, you're probably going to order them if you want to stay on the safe side. Most of them are going to get substituted because they're going to be out of like 60% of what you wanted. You want to spend a lot of money on paper products and hand sanitizer? Good luck finding a supply. You couldn't get them. There were people paying extra to get PS5s, which you couldn't get PS5s. You couldn't get anything. I'm just not really, stuff started to kind of shut down there in 2020, especially late 2020. Things were getting a little sticky. So yeah, I was better off right when the pandemic was heating up. Way to revise history, Glenn, you moron.
And we've always asked, I wish somebody would just run this place like a business. Well, that's what Donald Trump was doing, and look at the results until COVID happened. So
Donald Trump did not run the country like a business.
Go out and vote. I think if everybody, they're going to try to blackpill you.
Go out and vote? Don't vote absentee ballot?
But if you don't listen to that and you go out and vote, I think the numbers will be overwhelming. But what do I know?
Well,
this election is going to be a squeaker in both directions. I mean, no matter which way it goes. I cannot imagine. No, it's going to be close.
I would tell you this too, Glenn. There are certain states that have already passed election integrity, and voter security laws. So
I think the state of Michigan was one of them.
States like Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Florida. I mean, the more states that are passing these voter integrity laws, which I know the left will tell you is racist, and
none of those. Okay, keep that in mind. Put a pin in that if you're interested in this. Despite the fact that those states did that, if one of those states goes blue, and I'm looking at you, Georgia, if one of those goes blue, they're going to forget that that voter initiative was done. These voter integrity things were voted in these states. If one of those states goes blue, they will conveniently forget that state passed that voter integrity thing. They'll go down there. What we need is voter. But there's no way they could have voted for Trump. There must have been unprecedented fraud. But wait a minute. Just in June 13th of 2024, you said that they passed a bunch of voter integrity stuff. And other states should have followed suit. But now, because they went blue, oh my God, they're going to have to do more. I mean, I don't know why they don't just skip to the end and just say, look, this voting thing isn't working. We just need a king.
And they'll tell you they're not allowing you to drink water in line and all of these other lies. The fact of the matter is these are states that are making elections more secure. And, we can have other states follow suit in that.
Yeah, hopefully they don't pass too many voter ID. A lot of states started going the other way during the pandemic because they started following things like, the interesting thing about this is like they want to talk about like strict voter ID laws and strict registration requirements. The state of New York, one of the bluest states you can get, part of the blue wall for Dems. I think you got to be registered to vote like 8 months out, 6 months out. And if you miss that registration, you're not going to vote that year. You're out. I think they've finally lightened that up. They had just crazy regressive voter requirements in that state, mostly due to administrative timing and just, fuckery. Bridge the Divide was an essential worker back then. Yes, I don't imagine you were having a great time in 2020 either. My wife works in the hospital, so COVID was super exciting for all of us. Oh yeah. Anybody that I worked with that was in healthcare, yeah, it was crazy talking to them on the phone. Especially when, they were usually pretty laid back if they were on the mend from COVID, but had been off work for 2 weeks, and they're calling me and we're dealing with like administrative stuff. And they're just like, well, I'm going back next week, but I've been down with COVID for 2.5. Like, this is my second time. Like, holy shit. These are RNs, nurse practitioners, physicians. Let's see.
All right, Blaze Original, episode number 5, Voter Fraud Exposed, How Elections Can Be Stolen. It's a new doc, and it's out now. If you are a Blaze TV subscriber, if you're not, go to blazetv.com/Glenn. And what is the promo code?
I can't emphasize enough that you should not do that. Just don't do that. Don't go to that channel. Why Hunter Biden's conviction could backfire. Don't celebrate yet. Oh, boy. So Glenn Beck has really hit the bottom of the barrel in terms of peddling the old conspiracy theory crap. So I'm going to give one and getting really, is he extra pudgy? I mean, I'm trying not to fat shame on myself and pudgy, but good Lord, that Van Dyke is just barely there. How elections can be stolen, aka hypothetical bullshit invented from fever dreams of Glenn Beck's imagination. Yeah. I was also considered an essential worker during the plague. People surprisingly still wanted to drink water. I know, crazy. It's the liberals, man. It's these entitled Gen Z and alpha kids. No, I want water. Why doesn't it come out of my faucets like we pay for? So yeah, I think just going forward, I'll my final thoughts on this are this. I think Biden has a pretty good chance of winning. I'll be voting for him. The reason that I'm voting for him is very, very simple. You don't vote necessarily for the guy. You vote more or less for the cabinet that he would put in place. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to vote. I was really hoping Sanders would be going up because I thought the people that he would pick to run the various departments and the advisors that he would surround himself in would be good. And that was what I wanted. You're kind of voting for a team. You're not voting for some Superman. And with Biden, I think that's I've liked the pick he has for the FEC, great. Pick he has for the current Department of Education, great. A lot of the stuff that they've done administratively, I think, has been good. It's incrementally moving in the right direction. They don't get a lot of credit for it. And some of the things that are moving in the right direction are things that Republicans actively hate, because it means the government can actually perform services for the people it represents in a way that, doesn't screw them over. And Republicans hate that. They want to make sure that you're still paying them to represent you while they eliminate those services, and then get you to not only pay them for that, for the trouble of screwing that up, but then turn around and pay their friends in the private sector 3 times as much for the same services that the government could have provided more efficiently. That's essentially how Republicans work. That's not new. The only thing that's really new is the rhetoric. Beck has every reason to be afraid. So does somebody like Pine Creek. And this is why. Biden getting in for a second term. Let's think about this cleanly. Biden gets in, let's say he gets voted in. We're going to have to deal with the temper tantrum coming from right wingers and things like that. But that's it, right? Biden has always had the ambition to be president. He's president now, but every president wants to be a 2-term president, right? That's just the icing on the cake. Being a 1-term president, pretty good, pretty great. Being 2 terms, even better, right? That puts you in that elite platinum plus status category. If he does that, given his advanced age, and this is the area where I think people are not paying attention to why his advanced age is a positive. More than likely, because people are like, well, if Biden gets in, there's a very good chance he could pass away in the Oval Office. Statistically, yes, it's possible. He could pass away while serving in his second term. But Trump could also, statistically, stands a very strong chance of passing away if he gets in for another term, non-consecutive one. So that's really not that important. Here's what's important. This is Biden's bucket list if he gets the second term, right? He doesn't have to negotiate things anymore. He doesn't really have to compromise. If that guy gets in for a second term, that's the end of his career for the most part, right? Let's say he lives to be 98 years old. Fine. He's not going to be serving in another administration if he survives all 4 years of the second term. He just won't. After that, he'll do speeches, he'll do book tours, he'll do memoirs, whatever. He's going to be doing stuff like that. But he's going to be taking it easy. He's not going to be brought back in as Secretary of State or something like that, or Secretary of Defense. His career in Washington as an active public servant will be done, and he will have finished as a 2-term president. What does that mean when he gets in? The first 2 years of that second term, he will be throwing Hail Mary pass after Hail Mary pass in terms of legislation. So if not only does he get in, but if the Democrats actually take the House, he is probably going to do some pretty major stuff, some big moves, because he has nothing to lose. And he doesn't, and what he has to leave behind is not just his legacy as a 2-term president, but also a legacy in which he sort of secures things so that other Democrats can follow him up the ladder of success. Will he do that? I think he kind of will. So if you were wondering whether or not, hey, are we going to get 13 justices in the Supreme Court? If he gets in for a second term, I think there's a really good chance we might. There's no reason for him not to try. He can't, it's not like he's going to get, he doesn't get another shot, right? And that's his capstone, his last 4 years. So those first 2 years before a midterm election, they might as well go for broke. And the best thing that they could do is pack that court with 13 justices. Raise the number up to 13, eliminate that conservative deadlock that they've got going on, put in like 4 progressive judges, very progressive judges, get them on there. That way, any of the legislative accomplishments they attempt to do don't end up going into judicial review with a Supreme Court that's dead set against, getting rid of them. I think to me, that's the most important thing that they should do. So we'll see. I don't think that they are looking at losing the Senate. So as long as the Dems have control of that, he should be able to get his justices in. It's just going to depend on how bold he wants to be in his final term and his last this is going to be his last big accomplishment in his life. I think that's a good idea. For Trump, it's sort of the same thing. If he's not reflecting on the end of his days, he's reflecting on what his wealth is going to be doing. So what's he going to do? He's going to make sure that he grants himself enough legal liability that he doesn't have to face anything once those 4 years are up, should he survive all 4 years. And he's going to make sure his kids are in positions where they can maintain power and manipulate influence and money. I looked at the 538 data. They're at a statistical dead heat. It's early yet, but I'm confident of a Biden win if people vote. Yeah, I kind of am too. Also, I have it from a good source who is sort of like he's like a canary when it comes to this kind of stuff. My younger brother has accurately predicted, I think, just about every president that's ever won. And he just sort of like, after a while, he just sort of gets a sense and he's like, it's going to be him. He guessed it when Trump won. He was like, I just don't think Clinton's got the grit. I think people are going to go more for Trump. He's weird. He's goofy. And America is a fucked up place. And I think they're going to go for the more fucked up of the two. He was right. He believed that if it had been Sanders versus Trump, Sanders would have beat him. And I think he's right. He's called several of them so far. And with this one, his spidey sense started tingling and he's like, no, Trump's not going to get it. I think Biden's going to get it. It's going to be close. So I'm kind of going with his. Completely not scientific, but that's where I'm at. But yeah, anyway, that's why I'm voting for him, because I'm hoping that with a second term, Biden will be a lot bolder. And basically, it's going to be all gas, no brakes for any legislative agenda that he wants. The real trick, the real thing that's hampering his voter turnout right now, young people in the Gaza situation, and inflation, those kitchen table issues, which he can't do too much about. He can make them worse. He could make inflation worse by just giving everybody shitloads of money. But without putting some kind of controls in place. Yeah, who knows? Alito is planning to retire if Trump wins, so is Thomas probably, so Trump can replace them. That's 5 justices Trump might pick. Yeah, that's bad. So, and the easiest way to do that, if Alito and Thomas just decide, you know what, we'll just hang in there. Because there's currently no way to really actively impeach them, I think. And the scandals surrounding them and their grift are getting worse. The best thing to do is to go back to 13 justices. We had it before. We can do it again. So it's not that controversial. And there's no Supreme Court limit on the number of justices you can have serving on the Supreme Court. So they could do 24 if they wanted. Well, that's an even number, 21. Yeah, Biden wins in the first 100 days. Will be like, fuck your couch. I'm going to be awesome. Yeah, that's what I mean, it would not surprise me. I don't think they're going to be this brazen, but let's say that the results come in, Trump wins, Dems get the House, they keep the Senate, maybe even grow a majority. Let's say it's like a blue wave again. I would not surprise me to hear them making motions. Like as soon as they get in January with that new Senate and House, they've got that in a position. Well, actually, they'll still have a majority even in the lame duck session. They push to put those justices on there anyway. He just pushes to put 13 in there. He's still got a majority in the Senate. He's got the committees in place. He's appointing 4 more, go up to 13. They're in. I mean, that would be a ballsy move to expand the Supreme Court during a lame duck session. That would be a great big thumb in the Republicans' eyes. So they would not be able to really do anything against it. I mean, the House might. But if they wanted to play it safe, if they knew they had an incoming House majority, they could wait and do that then. But yeah, after the turn of the year, it really depends on those two factors. Does he get reelected? Do Dems maintain majority control in the Senate? Do they gain majority control in the House? If it kind of stays the same, that'll kind of slow things down. But I don't think that's going to halt him from trying. He's going to, like I said, it's going to be Hail Mary pass after Hail Mary pass for those first 2 years. He's going to be trying to make big moves before the midterm election hits. So the GOP is ill. What do you suggest, Doc? More thumbs in their eyes? Yeah, I think it helps. So Alito's wife basically said as much about his retirement in those secret recordings. Those are crazy that came out this week. She said they can't do anything about their neighbors till Alito is free of the court. Then she says they'll go after their gay neighbors legally. So she was implying he's retiring if Trump wins. Interesting catch. I didn't notice that. I couldn't stand to really listen to a lot of her commentary. She seems like a crazy person. So, all right, folks. Well, I've been on for a little over an hour, and this was kind of a short one. So I'm probably going to be back tomorrow to do my usual Saturday morning show or early afternoon, depending on when I jump on. So thank you to everybody in the comments. Thanks for jumping in and checking me out live. Made by Jim Bob was on live. So I appreciate anybody who's watching this live. You could have been over there watching Jim Bob's comment. Let's see. Thoughts on reinstating the fairness doctrine, including cable, satellite, and interwebs, and get news out of the entertainment business? I don't know. Well, I know that they reestablished net neutrality. I forgot to mention that one. That's back. So yeah, I mean, it's been small stuff like that that's gotten wound back. That's been, nice to see coming from his admin picks. And I do not want to sit around in another Trump term and listen to him appoint the head of Carl's Jr. to the Department of Labor. A guy that specializes in advertisements featuring shapely women who do not eat the lard lad burgers that he offered up. And he's going to be the one that's going to be representing the federal position on your rights as a wage slave in this country. And he was just one of several inept picks. And Trump promised to hire only the best people, and then ended up firing 45% of them, because it turns out they weren't the best people. His record on the best people is not great. So Jim Bob, I could have kicked myself in the nuts, but neither seemed like a good option. I agree. TPC or news shouldn't be entertainment. I totally agree with you. I think stuff like Fox News and stuff, I think a lot of that stuff needs to be, they need to do something about that. If somebody's got a decent plan of attack on that. But yeah, the sort of, it's not even infotainment, because it's not even providing information anymore. It's just providing goofed up narratives. I think that shit needs to go. I'd love to see a poll reflecting the independent voters. Some of the newer independent voters that have been coming around that they've been showing, it's not looking great for Trump, because a lot of them, when asked about, hey, are you more likely or less likely now to vote for him now that he's a convicted felon? One of the ones that I saw was showing that independent voters were I think it was 20 points, much less likely to vote for him. So, but it depends on who you're polling and where they're getting that from. I think a lot of those are too small. But again, that could change. A lot can change between now and November. So we will see. Yeah, exactly. When the Daily Show became legitimate news. Exactly. Yeah, it's winning Peabody's, or like last week tonight with John Oliver. Some of the best sources of kind of long form investigative journalism are coming from a weekly HBO show hosted by a comedian. So yeah, go figure. ProPublica and AP every day, the Majority Report for analysis. I like Majority Report. It's fun to listen to while I work. ProPublica is great. I go to AP for headlines. ProPublica is really good, especially for long form journalism. So, and if you're interested in ProPublica, donate if you can. Really good stuff. So, all right, with that, thank you everybody in the live chat for keeping it fun. And thanks for this one. I apologize to anybody that this one bored. It was pure politics. It was pure Glenn Beck. I've always wanted to review some of his content, but never really, picked one. And now, yeah, this one happened to come across my email. So special thanks again to Jesus is Lord / rebuke and reprove for sending me that along. Keep sending me your suggestions. Yeah, you crazy weirdo. And I might host one again. So let's remove this and let's get out of here. I will catch you all later. Take it easy. And I will see you all, for me, tomorrow morning. For you, whenever you want. So take care.